So yesterday we studied about the minimum wage. So minimum wage is the rule. Basically, it's usually by the law, but not necessarily by some countries. Minimum wage is not set by the law, but by collective bargaining between the national union and the employers. But in Korea's case, it's by law, and basically it says that you cannot pay less than the minimum wage to your employees, and then we have seen the impact on labor market. Basically what happens is that except for the monopsony case, the minimum wage will reduce labor demand. So the jobs will disappear. And in monopsony case, you can have special case where the actually the employment level increases. Okay? So the key issue about the minimum wage is always have been what is the impact of minimum wage on the employment. Okay? So actually there has been lots of studies about the impact of minimum wage on employment. So in summary, basically this slide basically summarizes the results. So most empirical studies that using the data, so empirical means that they use the data and then look at what the effect of minimum wage on employment, and including Korean data, and actually the raising the minimum wage decreases the employment of youth. So what usually happens is that when they increase minimum wage, it does not affect all the employees. Because, for example, if you think of, let's say, 35-year-old full-time workers, and then most of them are actually getting more than the minimum wage. So they are not likely to be the group that is affected by the minimum wage directly. Probably they will be affected by minimum wage indirectly, but that's not very big. So usually it affects the groups that are likely to get the minimum wage most. And in most countries, they are young people, youth. Okay? Or in some cases can be old people. But generally, a lot of studies on the minimum wage, impact of minimum wage on employment, a lot of them actually look at the youth labor market in particular. Okay. And what they generally find is that it does decrease employment of the youth. Okay. So, but what about the size of the effect? It's not that big. Most of studies find that it has a moderate negative effect on employment of youth. Okay. But there is a famous, well-known study by Card and Kruger. It's about 20 years old. The study actually found the positive effect of minimum wage on employment level in the fast food industry. So this study is very well known, actually. So Card and Kruger study, and it was very controversial at the time because it was obviously the finding was, in a way, it's opposite to what we usually expect from the minimum, because it actually found increases the employment level. So there has been lots of studies, lots of discussions about it, and I think in general what they found is that if they use different data, then they find that actually the employment level decreased. Okay. So it's a famous study. Actually, this is a very interesting study because they actually called the fast food restaurants to find out the employment level. So it's an interesting study. If you're interested, you can find out more about this study. And it's not that difficult to understand and read the study itself, because it uses very simple statistical tool to find the impact of minimum wage. Okay, so there's an interesting study about the apartment security guard in Korea. Because what happened was that, the apartment security guard, they were actually exempt from, not exempt, actually the minimum wage for those group of people has been lower than the normal minimum wage. I think they changed it, I think last year. So from last year, they should, now they are paid the full minimum wage, but before it was lower, okay? And then sometime they increased it, still lower than the minimum wage, but still like a 70 to 80% and 90%. So they actually look at the what happened to apartment security guards, and they found that actually it had a negative impact. When they increased the minimum wage for that particular group, their employment level actually has decreased. Okay? And it's a very interesting study. I think it's a similar thing. We can do it actually recently, because now they are getting the full minimum wage. So there has been some stories that lots of apartments actually laid off their security guards and then changed it to, let's say, like automatic door lock and those kind of things. So that's interesting. But anyway, what it tells us is that in general, there is a negative impact on employment level, but it's not likely to be very large. Okay. But there is I think that we should have a little bit careful about the small size of the minimum wage, because if you look at how the minimum wage changes, it does not change much actually. It changes probably by 5%, 6%, but it does not change by, let's say, 20%. Okay, so there has not been a big, large-scale increases. Most countries, the minimum wage when it's increased, it increases by a moderate size. Okay? So this study is actually based on such increases of moderate sizes. But if we increase, let's say, minimum wage by a lot, then actually we are not sure. Okay? This study is not exactly, probably the results from the very big increase will be different from what we expect from these studies. So I'm just telling you that in a way that's a limitation based on the data, because what we can do is that we use only the existing data. So if something really different happened from, let's say, the existing data, then our research findings may not be relevant to such cases. Okay, so this is the empirical study. Now, so last thing I want to talk about is the poverty issues and the minimum wage, because quite often the minimum wage is considered to be some type of anti-poverty policy tool. Okay, so increasing the minimum wage, can they solve the poverty problem, or can it contribute to solving the poverty problem in a big way? Okay, it is possible, but there are actually arguments against that big hope for the minimum wage, because one thing is that what they actually found is that minimum wage, when they increase the minimum wage, it does reduce income inequality, and it does reduce the poverty rate. Okay, so it has, in some parts, it actually does reduces the poverty problem, but is it the best tool? Actually, it's not that easy to say it's the best way of doing it, because one reason is that the minimum wage, the workers, the minimum wage workers are not necessarily the poorest group in the society. Okay? So if you think of the minimum wage, the big difference between the, let's say, minimum wage and, for example, like welfare program or EITC, minimum wage does not necessarily target the poorest people. Okay? The welfare program, EITC, it clearly targets the poorest income group, and that's the objective of the policy. Minimum wage is not specifically targeted to poorest people. what it just says is that you cannot pay less than the minimum wage. So it doesn't matter whether your employee are from rich family or poor family. You just have to pay minimum wage or higher. So it is not specifically targeted to the poorer individuals. So it is quite possible the minimum wage workers are not necessarily the poorest group. So what we can, it's a bit old data, but what we can look at is what are the distribution of household income of minimum wage workers. Okay? So what we look at is that there is a worker, but this worker belongs to a household, belongs to a family. So we look at the family income on the whole. So we are just looking at whether this minimum wage worker is from poor family or not that poor family. Okay? So this is income decile. Income decile means that one means these are the poorest 10% households, and the second 10%, third 10%. So these are the richest. Okay, so what you can see here is that minimum wage workers, if you believe that minimum workers are all poor, then they should be actually have to be only here, right? But as you can see that they are all over the place. Okay? Even some people from, let's say, richer 30%, these are top 30% family in terms of their income, even it's not even like a significant portion of the minimum wage belong to this group as well. Okay? Obviously, lots of them are in this poorest group, but still we can have quite a large number of groups who are actually better than the median family income. Okay? So I mean that's understandable, because it doesn't ask your family background when they pay you the minimum wage. Okay? It is possible that some young people get a job, for example, like as a part-time work, okay, to get some extra money. Okay? So those kind of things can happen. So that's one issue. Okay? And what's more is that this was red one is 1999, then this is 2008. As you can see that 2008 minimum wage people are actually richer in terms of their family income. Okay? So that's the one issue about the minimum wage. They are not necessarily poor. Okay? And whether it's the best policy, actually lots of people think that actually EITC should be the better one than the minimum wage as a tool to reduce the poverty problem. So basically EITC and minimum wage, in a way it's a similar, okay? Because EITC and minimum wage both, okay, gives extra money in a sense. Minimum wage is similar, money to working people. So in that sense, it's quite similar. But EITC is actually specifically targeted for the lower earning individuals and families. So lots of people actually suggest that EITC should be an alternative to minimum wage. Okay. And it's a difference. You know, also there is a big difference. EITC is paid by the general taxpayers' money, and minimum wage is paid by the employers. Okay? So the EITC is, the burden of EITC in a way is spread over the general population. Okay? The burden of minimum wage is concentrated on the employers. Okay? So there should be probably a policy mix between EITC and the minimum wage. Right? So raising the minimum wage may not be the best way of dealing with it. So I mean, we should look at more broadly. Okay? That's the last remark on the minimum wage. Any questions? Okay. So we have seen so far the three important policy tools that are expected to alleviate the poverty problem in the society. Right? One is the welfare programs, The other one is EITC. And then the last one, the third one we have seen is the minimum wage. Okay, so all these three things are present in most advanced countries. So you can find the similar features in almost any country, and then we have seen the economic analysis of the effects of those three things on the labor market. As you have seen that now no single policy is perfect. Okay, every policy has its own strengths and weaknesses. So when you think of, let's say, some policy issues, okay, it's important to look at their strength and weakness, and then decide on its whole. Okay. Now, what we are going to do it today and for probably up to next week is to look at the income inequality issue. Okay, we have seen the poverty problems, and the poverty issues are often related with income inequality. So we can ask a question why some people are poor and some people are rich, and how we measure, let's say, income inequality, how unequal our society is, for example. And then let's say we look at how the income inequality has changed over time, and then we ask a question why it happened that way. Okay, so that's the thing that we're gonna start. So we will deal with the income inequality first, and then we will look at the intergenerational mobility. Intergenerational mobility is basically, it's meaning that whether the individual from poor families can be rich, okay, in the next generation. So generational mobility, intergenerational mobility is that whether the poor families will stay poor over generations, or they may have chance to be rich. Okay, that's the question about intergenerational mobility. Okay? So first we will deal with income inequality. So we basically look at the inequality at a given time, and then we will look at the movement between income groups over generations. Okay? So that's the two things that we're going to do it. So it's a long list of what you're going to do. First, we will look at the earnings distribution itself, so how earnings are distributed. And then we will look at how to measure inequality, and then what is the trend of inequality, and then in the trend, what you are going to see is the income inequality has been increasing actually for quite some time. So we will look at why that happened, and then last thing we're going to look at intergenerational income mobility. Okay. I think for the midterm, probably we can, before midterm, we can probably do it up to this point. So my goal is that your midterm will cover up to this point, not the last one. Okay. Okay, now let's look at the earnings distribution first. This is the histogram of earnings. Okay, so the data we look at is the August 2015 data. So this is the earnings, meaning they basically gives us the information of the salaries of people. Okay, so it does not include self-employed, only the employees. Okay, and you can actually get the data of different sources, but I'm not gonna give you like the exact earnings distribution. What I'm going to give you is just how the earnings distribution generally looks like. Okay. So what you can see here is that this is monthly salary. So 0 is a 5 million won, 10 million won, right, and so forth. And what you can see here is that lots of people are actually around here. So it's like 2 to 3 million, 2 to 4 million. So that's a typical earnings of monthly earnings of Koreans. Okay. What it gives us is, what is interesting feature of this diagram is it has a long right tail. Okay? So there are a small group of people, it's not that large as you can see. When you look at the whole distribution, these are not the, like 5% or less. But still, there are people who get much higher earnings than most of the people. Okay? So there are not many, but those who earn more than 5 million won per month. Okay? But it's not that big. The proportion is not that. Absolute majority of them are here. There are some people who earn way more than the typical earnings. Actually, there is some people around here. Okay? So this is a typical earnings distribution, meaning that if you look at the earnings distribution of any society, you will look at the diagram similar to this one. This is not unique to Korea. So typical earnings distribution is generally look like something like this. Okay? So majority of them are here, and then there are a small number of people who earn much more than others. Okay? So this is a typical earnings distribution, and that's the first topic that we're going to talk about today. Oh, here the mean, just to give you information, just the mean earnings, monthly salary is about 2.25 million won, and median is 1.9. So median is smaller than mean. If you have a distribution that looks like this, that should be the case. Median is smaller than mean, because mean is bigger because there are people who earn a lot, so it pushes up the mean. Okay? But if you have 50% of people who actually earns 1.9 million won per month or less. Okay? And standard deviation is how dispersed this distribution is. I'm not going to talk about the last. But so the median is, so meaning that if you earn, when you get a job, and then let's say your monthly salary is more than, let's say 2 million won per month, you are actually earning more than 50% of whole Korean employees. Okay? So if you think about it, typical employees in Korea earn 2 million won, around 2 million won, okay, per month. Okay, so that's the diagram. So earnings distribution. STD, that's a standard deviation. Yeah, you calculate the variance, and then you take the square root. That's standard. Basically, it gives you how dispersed this distribution is.
Square root of the variance.
Yeah. Okay. Okay. Now, as I said, the earnings in most societies, earnings and wages is skewed to the right. Okay, there is a name for this shape. Okay, in statistics, we call this shape of distribution is skewed to the right. Okay, so right means here. Okay, so skewed to the right basically means positive. Okay, skewed to the right or positively skewed, the same thing, because when they calculate the statistic called skewness, and when you have skewed to the right distribution, it has skewness is positive number. So that's why it's called positively skewed. And what it gives us, it basically has a long, we say it has a long right tail. So think of this as some type of animal. Okay? This is head, body. This is tail. Head, body, tail. So the tail to the right, and it's long. So we call it long right tail. Okay? Get it? So the same thing. Skewed to the right, positively skewed, long right tail, all same thing. Okay? So these are basically the statistical term that describe this shape of distribution. Okay? Obviously, when the distribution looks like this, we call it skewed to the left. Okay? Negatively skewed. long left tail. Basically the same thing. Now, how about this? How do we call this? Skew to the center? What is it? Normal. Normal is a bit strong term. It looks like normal, but it's not. It may not be a normal distribution. But what it has is that left side and right side has the same shape, right? This one is left side and right and has different shape. It has left and right as the same shape, so we call this symmetric. Okay? So symmetric distribution just means the left side, right side looks the same. Okay? Skewed means left side and right side does not look the same. So that's skewed. Okay? So in statistics, symmetric, antonym for symmetric is skewed. Okay? Or asymmetric, but skewed is more general term, skewed. Skewed distribution simply means it's not symmetric. So either it has long left tail or long right tail. Okay. We are concentrating on the earnings distribution that are positively skewed or skewed to the right. Okay? You see that? Okay, so that's what it is. So most workers earn relatively low wages. It's not absolutely low wages, but when you look at it, there's a lower side, so relatively low wages. But there are a small portion of people who earn a lot, okay? So when you add all the people's income into, let's say, big pot, and then see what share these people have, is actually it's much bigger than the number of people. See? They probably are just 1% of total people, but they may earn, let's say, 10% of whole income. Okay, that's what it means. I'm not. Okay, so basically what it gives us that in particular 2015, the top 10% salary earners earned no less than 5.8 times as much as the bottom 10% salary earners. So if you have top 10% and look at the bottom 10%, if you compare their earnings, top 10% earns at least 6 times as much as bottom 10%. Okay? So, there's a big difference. Okay. So what it says is basically earnings distribution is not equal. Okay? Top portion of people earn a lot more than bottom portion of people. And it's not unique to any one country or one society. Actually, it's generally the case. There is a difference in the degree of skewness, but skewness itself is a general feature. Okay. So, then why does it happen? Okay, so let me explain why. Let me explain why. Okay, what happens is, okay, there is a standard explanation for this. Let me give you when you, in economics, or when you think about it, what determines an individual's earnings? Okay, how much income do you get? What determines your income? Okay, it can be a few things, okay? One, probably how lucky you are. Who knows? I mean, luck is quite important thing, right? So you wake up and then you get a job and it turns out to be that was pretty a good job or whatever. Okay, so luck is important, but what we should think is that luck does not favor any particular group of people. So luck should be pretty much generally distributed evenly. So each person has an equal chance of being lucky. Probably that's the case. So luck is important, but it does not affect your distribution much because it's evenly distributed. So we forget about the luck. Okay. Now what you need? Okay, first thing is that probably what you need is the particular skill level, how skillful you are, okay, how knowledgeable you are. Okay. how valuable, I mean, how well you work. Okay, that's basically the question. Or you can think of it's not only employees, also if you're a self-employed, if you have your own business, it's also quite important. What kind of skills you have? Good management skills, right? Good knowledge of the market, all those things. So we can just call it the skills. Okay? So these skills you can develop, right? So you can learn and study. You know, you basically that's what you're doing here, right? So you're learning things, and then it will contribute somehow to your economic return in the future. Okay? So we in broad terms we call it human capital. Okay? It's like a capital. It's like money. Okay? But it's not in cash form. It's in your body in a way. Okay? Maybe in your heart, it may be in your brain or wherever. Okay? You develop your human capital. Okay? In general, the higher human capital means higher earnings. That's true. For example, if you look at the individuals of different education level, then you will generally find that the higher the education level, the higher the income. Okay? So that's the human capital. And second thing, but there is something else. It's likely, maybe it's the ability. Okay? How you're born with. Okay? Just, you know, if you think about it, so human capital plus ability determines your earnings, plus luck. But okay, luck it is evenly distributed. Okay. So what you can think is if there is no human capital, let's say ability may be distributed like symmetrically. Okay, it's probably like that's usual assumption about the ability distribution in the population. Okay, what it means is that most of the people are basically like a normal, like a median level of ability. Most of people have like a middle level of ability, but there are small group of people who have very good ability, small group of people who have very low ability, unfortunately, right? So there seems to be a reasonable assumption of ability distribution. So if you have a child who have no education whatsoever, then if you get the information about their abilities, then it's gonna look like. Okay? I mean, it's a bell curve, right? It's called bell curve, bell shape, whatever. So bell curve is generally generally the assumption, okay, or normal distribution, right? You mentioned. Okay? So the ability is considered to be normally distributed. Okay. Now, so if everything is determined by ability, then earnings distribution should look like a bell-shaped curve, symmetric. But it's not symmetric, right? What happens is that these people have much higher earnings. So what happens here is that the theory goes, ability and human capital, they reinforce each other. Okay, why? Because when you think of the human capital, so think of investment in human capital, so learning and getting skills and all those things. These people have higher ability. Okay? So these people actually can acquire skills much more easily than most of other people. Okay? Since it is easier for them to acquire skills, they are likely to get much more skills than the others. Okay? So what it means is when you add the human capital to this diagram, it's going to look like this. Because these group of people will get much more skills, okay? So this right tail will get longer and longer. Okay? And then rest of us are around somewhere here. Okay? So that's the standard view of why earnings distribution is necessarily positively skewed, because ability itself reinforces their skill development. Okay? So higher ability individuals, they are not that much, they are not that many. in terms of their numbers, but they acquire much more skills than others that increases their income much more substantially than most of the other people. Okay? So that's the general explanation. Okay. Probably that's not the only explanation, but that is the explanation that you can think of. Okay. So what we established here is, so far, is earnings distribution, income distribution, or because most of people, earnings are just income. Most of people have not much of non-labor income. Non-labor income is quite rare to most of people. Okay, if you think about yourself or your family, okay, how much non-labor income your family gets, most of families, it's not that much. Most of income come from your earnings. Or even if you have non-labor income, those non-labor income mostly coming from the savings of your earnings in the past. So in the sense that earnings and income are pretty much interchangeable. Okay. So here we establish the income is unequally distributed. But it does not mean that every society has the same degree of inequality. So we're going to look at now that how you measure the degree of inequality. Okay? That's the issue that we're going to look at right now. So now, actually you should have heard about these measures before, so I will just give you, quick look at it. Okay, first we learn about Lorentz curve. Okay, Lorentz curve probably have showed up somewhere else. Okay, so to most of you probably it's just old term you already know. What is a Lorentz curve? Lorentz curve is the idea that the Lorentz head. Lorentz is it's the name of a person. I think it's an American. Lorentz curve. Okay, let me use the diagram itself. Okay, the idea is this. You have, let's say, households or individuals. Okay, it doesn't matter. But anyway, you have a unit of counting. Let's say individuals or households. Okay, so when you are thinking of household income distribution, then unit is household. Think of individual income distribution, unit is individual. So let's say household. Okay. What it does is, let's say we have an information of each and every family's income. Okay. Then what we do is, let's say we have, to be simple, let's say we have 100 families, households, and we know that each and every family's income. Okay. Then let's assume, to be really simple, let's assume that every family earns the exact same amount of income. As every family has $1,000 as income. Okay. Now what you do is we get the data, and then what we do is that we order the family by their income. Okay, let's say from the lowest to the, let's say, highest. Okay? If they have the same amount of income, actually it doesn't matter. But if they have different income, what you do is that from lowest to highest. Let's say the lowest 1, 2, 3, 4, up to 100. Okay? So lowest one, we call it household 1, and second, household 2, the highest, household 100. Okay? Then what we do is that we have their income, right? So let's say Y1, Y2, Y3, just call it Y100. Okay? So this is highest, lowest. Okay? Get that? And then we can think of their total household income, right? So total of all 100 households. Okay? Then what we do? We get share of each household of the total income. So y1 by the total divided by sigma yi. So just the total households. y2. Okay? Get it? No, actually that's not exactly the way. Okay, what we have to do is this. We get the cumulative share. So first one y1 sigma yi. For the second one, we add y1, y2, and sigma y. Okay? So the cumulative share from poorest to up to this point. And then third, we have what? y1 plus y3, and then, okay? Get it? Get the idea? Right? And 4, we have y1 up to y4. Okay? And then when you reach the top one, it's going to become 1, right? Because we just add all them up. So top is the share, top share is just 1. Top cumulative share should be 1. Okay? What is Lorentz curve? Lorentz curve is just a diagram of this and this. Okay? The first column and the last column. This is just the Lorentz curve is just diagram of these two columns. Okay? So the horizontal column gives the share of the households. Basically, I used 100, okay, because it basically gives the share. 1 is the 1% of total households, right? 2, it means 1 to so up to this point, 2% of households. 3, up to this point, 3% of households. 4 is 4% of households, okay? You add all the household, number of households up that point. When you go there, it's 100% of the households. Okay, so or it's in terms of proportion, it's a share. It's 1. Okay, so that's what we have. Okay, and then this one gives you the share of income. This one. Okay, so how you look at it is, if you have and then you just draw a curve that shows this relationship. So what it shows is when you look at the curve, let's say you pick this curve, okay, let's say this is a Lorentz curve, and then you look at the up to this point, when what it shows us is that what is the share of income of bottom 20% of the total income. Okay, so bottom 20% gets the what's the share of bottom 20% of the households. Okay, and it is bottom 40%, bottom 60%, bottom 80%, and then everyone. Okay. Now, if you think of let's think of a society that everyone has the same income. Every household has the same income. Okay. Then what is the share of bottom 20% of the total income? Everyone gets the same income. Then bottom 20% should have 20% of total income because everyone gets the same. 40% should have 40%, bottom 40. Bottom 60 should have 60%. So that's the red one. Okay? So if every household has the same income, we will have red Lorentz curve. Okay? Just a 45-degree line. Okay? Get that? So that is like our benchmark. Okay? So this is the absolutely equal income distribution, meaning everyone has the same. Okay? Now there is a society, for example, the opposite extreme. Only one household has everything. Okay? The other households have nothing. Then what is the share of bottom 20%? 0, right? Bottom 40, 0. So what you have is basically this horizontal axis, pretty much, right? And then when you go to the last one, then it will be, right, 1. Okay, because you add them up, then last one has everything. So if you think about that diagram, that curve is going to look like this and that, right? So it's like a reversed L, right? It doesn't look like L. It's just it's a mirror image of L. Okay? So that's the other extreme. Okay? So that's the like absolutely unequal income distribution. One has everything, okay, and the other has nothing. Okay. Then what is a typical income distribution then? Obviously the in between, right? So no society, as far as I know, has perfectly equal income distribution. No society, probably except for North Korea, has no perfectly unequal income distribution. Okay? So most of society has in between. Now, what is going to be typical income distribution then? Bottom 20% does not have actually 20%. They are likely to have less than 20% because top people are much richer than bottom people. Okay, so when you add bottom people's income, it's not going to be 20%. It's going to be much smaller. Okay, and then 40% is not going to have 40%. Okay, so it's basically what it means is that this blue one, the realistic one, going to have a curve that is actually below the red one. Okay? But anyway, the starting point, ending point should be the same. Okay? It starts from 0 and ends at 1, but everything will be below the red one. So it's going to look like this curve. Okay? That's the typical Lorentz curve. Okay? Actually, I did it for 2004 income data. It's going to look like this. But anyway, it's not that important. It's 2004. What it just tells us is that this is a typical Lorentz curve you see in most of societies. Okay? Get that? So Lorentz curve gives us quite a comprehensive picture of what the income distribution look like. But there is a problem with the Lorentz curve because it takes up too much space, right? So I want to see the income distribution, how it changed over time. Then you have to draw Lorentz curve for every year. It's quite difficult. And also, it's not that easy to compare like a graph to graph, right? So what we need is a much more simpler way of expressing income distribution. So that's where the Gini coefficient comes in. What is a Gini coefficient? Gini is a name. Gini is I think he's an Italian economist. Okay. This is not the genie in the bottle. It's a person. Now, the idea of Gini coefficient, if you actually look at the idea, it's actually very, very simple but insightful one. What it gives us is, hey, if the society's income distribution becomes unequal, this blue curve gonna approach this reverse L shape, right? When it becomes equal, more equal, it's gonna approach this red straight line. Okay? So what it means is if this Lorentz curve is further away from red one, it must be more unequal. Approaches the red one must be more equal. So the size of this area between red one, blue one must give us an idea how unequal this income distribution is. So size of this banana shape. Okay, that's what Gini. So and then we want to have like a 0 to 1 index that's easier to deal with. So what we do is, okay, we have this the size of this area divided by size of this whole triangle. Okay? So if red one becomes reverse L shape, okay, perfectly unequal, absolutely unequal society, the Gini coefficient is going to be 1. Right? So we divide this area by this triangle. Okay, so basically it gives us the share of this area within the triangle. And then if it becomes perfectly equal, gonna be what? 0, because there is no area. Okay, get it? So 0 is perfectly equal, 1 is perfectly unequal, then we have numbers in between, and that gives us the idea that how unequal this income distribution is. Okay, that's Gini coefficient. Okay, so it's a nice way of summarizing the Lorentz curve. Okay, and it's easy, and then it takes up only just one number. So it's much easier to deal with it, much easier to report it, and much easier to compare it. So when you have that, then we can actually, for example, like compare across time, compare across countries or whatever. Given that we calculated Gini coefficient in the same way using this very comparable data. Okay. So that's what the Gini coefficient is. So 0 is perfect equality, 1 is perfect inequality. Okay? So when you see the report about, let's say, the Korea's Gini coefficient got bigger, it means it became more unequal. It's got smaller, it means it became more equal. Okay? So the Gini coefficient is actually you can say that the size of inequality, like inequality index. Okay? So bigger means more unequal. Now, but there is a problem with the Gini coefficient. Okay? The problem of Gini coefficient is that actually it's always, I mean, when you summarize the whole diagram into one number, it necessarily has some problem. The problem here is that it simply gives us basically the area, the size of the area, right? So which means that even if Lorentz curve may look different, still it may give us the same Gini coefficient. Okay? So for example, you may have like a same Gini coefficient with a very different shape of Lorentz curve. Something like this. Okay? So when you have these two Lorentz curves, it may give us the same Gini coefficient, right? Because you assuming that these two areas are the same. Okay? Right? Get it? Okay? So here this one is much more flat, this part, and then goes up sharply, and this one goes up sharply at first, and it becomes goes up, it's a relatively flat and goes up sharply. Anyway, so what it gives us the same Gini coefficient. So it looks like nothing changed. But when you look at it, it's actually these two societies is very different. You look at the bottom group. Red one, bottom group is much poorer than the blue one, right? When you look at the red one, the income share of bottom one is very, very low compared to blue one. Right? So Gini coefficient may be misleading. Okay? You know what I mean? So if you want to actually look at in more detail, probably it's better idea to look at the Lorentz curve itself. Okay? So that is the case. Okay? But it's in reality, people use Gini coefficient a lot actually. Okay? So we will use Gini coefficient quite often when we look at the actual data. Okay, so we discussed about Gini coefficient. Let's look at the Gini coefficient itself. Gini coefficients of OECD countries, 2120. That's like 10,000 years, 18,000 years later, but okay. It's 2012. Okay, I have just extra 0. Okay, 2012. Okay, now two things. Actually, it has been reported quite often in newspapers recently, so let me explain what they mean. Okay, when you think of income, okay, income is not that simple. Income, and when they calculate Gini coefficient in terms of OECD statistics and also the national statistics of Korea, they distinguish two different incomes. Actually, there may be more than two, but the important ones are two income. One is before tax and transfers. So how much you earn actually, in your pocket initially. So it's often called market income. How much you get from market, okay? That's before tax and transfers. And then there's income after tax and transfers, okay? So you pay income tax, property tax, whatever, and then you may get transfers from government in terms of, let's say, if you're poor, you may get welfare benefit. You're old, you probably get national pension or something. So at the end, it's called disposable income, right? Disposable income is how much you can actually use. Okay? So if you're poorer, then in general, your disposable income is greater than the market income because you will get more transfers than tax. Right? If you're a richer relatively, then your disposable income is going to be smaller than the market income because you will pay higher tax, okay, relatively low transfer income. Okay? So there's a market income and disposable income. Okay? So when we look at the income distribution, we generally look at both sides, market income side and disposable income side. Okay? So this is before tax and transfers. This is market income side, this is disposable income side. Okay? You get that? And this red 45-degree line is that if there is no tax and transfer, okay, then Gini coefficient is going to be on the 45-degree line. And then we calculate Gini coefficient using market income and using disposable income. And then I just plotted it here. So each circle is one country, okay, reported by OECD statistics. So what you can see here is that Gini coefficient is quite widely distributed. Okay, that's one thing. And then second thing is that no country has point above 45-degree line or on the 45-degree line, which means disposable income Gini coefficient is smaller than market income Gini coefficient. That should be the case, right? Because richer people will pay more tax. Poorer people will get more transfer. So overall, disposable income must be more equal than market income. So that shows up in the statistics. So what it means, so when you compare the points to the 45-degree line, if the points is close to 45-degree line, which means there is not much of tax or transfer. Okay? So country with low tax, low transfer are going to close to 45-degree line. And countries that have high tax, high transfer are going to be further away from 45-degree line. Okay? So that's the case. Now, let's look at the market income side. Okay, then it's quite widely distributed. And you look at Korea, I just pointed out to Korea there. Korea is the most equal country in terms of market income distribution. Okay? It's equal, I mean, by far, actually. Okay, when you look at the Gini coefficient, by far, this is the most equal country in terms of market income distribution. Okay? And you will be surprised if you look at actually the Northern European countries, their market income distribution is very unequal. Okay? So their Gini coefficient is much more higher than Korea's Gini coefficient. Okay, that's one thing. So in terms of market income, Korea is the most equal among OECD countries plus some else. But if you look at, let's say, the disposable income distribution, Korea is basically in the middle, right? So it used to be, so this is most equal, but it's just in the middle. Okay? See, some countries more unequal, some countries more equal. Okay? So, for example, like most of Northern European countries are something like here. Okay? So their market income is very unequal, but their disposable income is quite equal. Okay? And Korea is here, and Korea is very close to 45-degree line, which means there's low tax, low transfer. Okay? So that's why their Gini coefficient it's in the middle, okay, even though their market income is very equal. I mean, is it good to have low transfer, low tax, or is it good to have high transfer, high tax? Actually, it depends. Okay? Some people suggest that Korea is a problem because of low tax, low transfer, but no. I think it just depends. Okay? Some countries have that system of low tax, low transfer, and some countries have the opposite. Probably there is a problem if you have like a low tax, high transfer, or high tax, low transfer. But anyway, so that's the case. So in terms of international comparisons, okay, Korea is, in terms of, let's say, disposable income, it's just the middle. Okay, it's not that unequal, it's not that equal. It's just around the middle when you compare the OECD countries. But yeah, if you're interested, more detailed numbers, actually, I can give you later. But anyway, you just go to the stats.oecd.org, and then you will see all the numbers there. They have all these statistics. Actually, not only 2012, they have old data as well. So you can draw this diagram by yourself. Okay. Well, lots of people think that Korea is very unequal, but when you look at actually international statistics, that's not necessarily the case about the middle. Okay. Well, why do people think Korea is more unequal income distribution? There is one possible reason, but I suspect that most of people in most countries will feel that their income distribution is more unequal than what actually shows up in statistics. Okay, now we just look at the Gini coefficient, but as I said, the Gini coefficient is not perfect, and it's not the only measure of income inequality. Actually, you will be surprised to find how many different measures are there to just measure income inequality. I'm not going to go over everything because some are very technical. So I'm not going to just go over every measures. Actually, if you're interested in such measures, you can actually look up yourself. There are so many. Okay. I'm just giving you like just the popular ones, that ones that show up much more often than others. One simple measure you can think of is just the variance. Variance, it just gives you how dispersed or distribution is. But variance is a problem because when the unit changes, variance changes as well, right? So like, if you have different units, then variance will become bigger or may become smaller. Okay? So variance is not a good measure. So sometimes we can use coefficient of variation, CV in short. It's just the standard deviation divided by the mean. The reason why we use this is when you change the unit, standard deviation and mean will change by the same rate. So when we divide it, it's just the change of unit will just cancel out. Okay? So that's why we use coefficient of variation. Okay? So CV, you may see it some cases, but it's not that popular. CV is somewhat technical, probably. Most of people who don't understand statistics probably would not understand what it means anyway. Okay? So the more popular ones is actually the income ratio. Okay? So income ratio is just the ratio of incomes at two different percentiles. Okay? There are some different flavors of income ratio, but I will give you just the very simple ones. Okay, so 90-10 income ratio simply means income at 90th percentile divided by income at 10th percentile. So that means that we just order every household or individual from lowest to the richest. Okay, so then 1, 2, 3, 4, right? 100. So we get percentile, meaning that like a top 1%, then second 1%, second 1%. So you know how to calculate the percentile, right? And then what we do is we just look at income at 10th percentile and 90th percentile. So 10th percentile, so people, individual on this exact 10th percentile is the person whose income is above the bottom 10% of the total households. So 90% is income whose income is below the top 10% of the households. Okay? So you can think of this as some kind of representative of rich person and representative of poor person. Okay? And then you divide income of 90th percentile, and then you divide income of 10th percentile, you just divide it. Okay? So that's 90-10 income ratio. Okay? So it roughly gives us how rich, by how much, by what degree, okay, this rich person is richer than the poor people. Okay? It's like a 10. If it's 10, it means that this person owns 10 times as much as this person. Okay? That means what? Top 10% actually own more than 10% of top bottom 10%. Because bottom 10% income would be lower than this one. Top 10% have income higher than this one. So if it's 10, actually most of rich people own more than 10 times as much as the poor people, bottom 10%. Okay? So the idea is that if the income gap between poor and rich gets smaller, this number will get smaller. If income gap widens, this number will get bigger. Now, you can actually apply the same idea to different percentiles. One popular one is 90-50. So this compares what? Rich to middle. Okay? So how rich people, how rich they are compared to, let's say, median income group. Okay? Or you can think of 80-20. 80-20 is just extend like rich people and poor people in a way. And 50-10, this compares median group to poor group. Okay? So popular ones like 90-10, 90-50, 50-10 is generally quite popular. But you will see like 80-20 sometimes. Okay? So when you see it, then you can actually, think, okay, this is kind of way of looking at how rich and poor, their income gap, how big their income gap is. Okay? Oh, I don't have numbers. Okay, I think I will stop here, and then next week we will continue.